On the 27th of July, a nuclear ship was attacked in St. Petersburg. A powerful strike on the Russian fleet disrupted the parade. Navy mom. The blast was heard near Putin's residence. The FSB is urgently evacuating facilities. Leningrad region, train stations, and the power plant are under heavy fire. Damn, they hit the train station. Whoa, that was a hell of a blast. The railway got hit right by the bridge. The bridge was blown up. The main intelligence directorate of the SBU congratulates Putin on Russian Navy Day. Direct hit. The ships are on fire. The parade is cancelled. Strike on Putin's residence. They hit it. Yeah, that's it. Right in the Rosneft area. Putin's residence is 2 kilometers away, the one where he pulled Trump from, at the operational command center. The Russians are screaming. Look at that incredibly thick, dark smoke, Arkasha. It's absolutely terrifying to witness. Yeah, I've definitely got it now. Right over there. It's truly a frightening and overwhelming sight to behold, isn't it? There it is. Damn, they're burning. They're smoking right next to your house. St. Petersburg airport is paralyzed. Hundreds of flights are delayed. Thousands of Russians are spending the night in airports. Crowds, panic, evacuation, screams. People are sleeping on the floor. 500,000 flights didn't depart or arrive. This is hysteria, agony. This is unreal. Move aside, woman, come here. People are heading en masse to underground parking lots. They are in shock because they are not used to it. And the locals run into the bushes. No. Your mother. The 27th of July, friends, is Navy Day. A series of sensational explosions in St. Petersburg. The Armed Forces of Ukraine, the main intelligence directorate, and the Security Service of Ukraine congratulate Putin on Navy Day. It's too late. And the strike on Putin's residence. Petersburg is on fire and in panic. The Navy parade has been cancelled. Explosions. Train stations are burning. Whoa, that was a hell of a blast. The railway got hit right by the bridge. Damn, they struck the train station. The main Navy parade in St. Petersburg, which was scheduled for the 27th of July for Navy Day, has been cancelled due to security concerns. Air defense is operating over the Leningrad region. At Pulkovo, more than 100 flights have been delayed. The Kremlin's fear of Ukrainian strikes on Navy Day and the lack of full control over the airspace. Ukrainian strikes are getting closer and closer to Putin's residence. Last night, drones exploded just a few kilometers from his command post in Sochi. The parade in St. Petersburg has been cancelled. Air defense is thundering over Vsevolozhsk and Kronstadt. More than 100 flights have been cancelled at Pulkovo. Drones attacked the region. In Armavir, a fighter jet exploded, and at an oil depot in Volgograd, there was a fire and explosion. You can see the smoke rising. Railway junctions and electrical substations have been blown up. Military trains. The Kremlin's plans are falling apart, and Trump is demanding an answer, either peace or consequences. We will discuss the congratulations from the Armed Forces of Ukraine, the main intelligence directorate, and the Security Service of Ukraine on Russian Navy Day with top analyst Alexander Demchenko right now. Petersburg is in panic. The Navy Day parade has been cancelled. Explosions. Train stations on fire. Explosions in Petersburg. Ukraine's Armed Forces, main intelligence directorate, and Security Service congratulate Putin and Russia on Navy Day. Well, let's discuss all of this with top analyst Alexander Demchenko right now. Dasha, welcome here.
Hello, Dasha. Hello, everyone.
Yes, so the strikes by the Ukrainian armed forces are, first of all, getting closer and closer to Putin's residence. What's notable today is the strikes on St. Petersburg and the Leningrad region in honor of Russia's Navy Day. The parade has been cancelled, tankers are exploding, the FSB is checking everything, but Putin is very frightened. What do you think?
Listen, well, Putin has been very scared for a long time. He even demolished his own residence, blew it to smithereens in Sochi at Bocharov Ruchi. Remember that? He had quite a residence there. 6 months ago, he blew it up to hell because he realized perfectly well that Ukrainian drones and Ukrainian missiles were getting closer and closer. And when they started hitting Sochi just recently, there was a strike on Sochi. That's it. There's no residents there anymore. It's in Gelendzhik now. The problem is, it's all the same region, Krasnodar Krai, you see? So I wouldn't be surprised if Vladimir Putin is currently somewhere in Gelendzhik. After all, he's been evacuated from Moscow. He's not there. He practically never works there. He's sitting somewhere in Gelendzhik, in his cliffs, in his mega bunker that's being built by the Rotenberg brothers or Timchenkov, whoever it is that's building this mega bunker for him. And he's trembling, he's afraid. And the fact that today the Navy Day parade was cancelled for the first time in many, many years, not because of the weather. No, it's not because Putin caught a cold. No, it's not because there aren't enough ships or because all the ships are broken. No, Dasha, no, it's not because of the economic crisis, but because Putin is afraid to appear in public, because he's afraid of his own people. He's afraid of his elite. He's afraid of his security service. He's afraid of his FSB agents. He's afraid of his own people. He's afraid of his ministers. He's afraid of a Ukrainian drone and a Ukrainian missile. He's absolutely afraid of everything. And he understands that neither the cross that Kirill Gundyev gives him every single time, nor the bulletproof vest that the head of the FSO Kokhnev puts on him will help him. Remember how he walked on Red Square, not this time, but the previous time, when he was reviewing the parade with Lukashenko. And there were also other heads of state who arrived from the CIS countries and even further Central Asia. Then shooting started. There was some gunfire, a cannon fired either at the wrong time or later than it was supposed to. Well, in short, it fired. Everyone surrounded him and he hid in the center. He threw Lukashenko under the bus, pushed him into the line of fire, and that was it. You see? What's happening now is simply a demonstration. They've shown all of us that Putin is afraid. Putin won't come. He's scared. He can't do it. He can't force himself. He's having a panic attack. He's just afraid to appear in public. And this is extremely important, just as it's extremely important, Dasha, that Ukrainian drones are now flying over Pulkovo, St. Petersburg, yet another airport is shut down, Leningrad region, St. Petersburg, Pulkovo. It's a very, very long way from Ukraine to St. Petersburg. This isn't a trip from Petersburg to Moscow or from Moscow to Petersburg. No, it's a huge territory that's being crossed, a vast distance that Ukrainian drones are covering, dozens and dozens of Ukrainian drones already, and soon missiles will be flying there too. And what will they do? Where will they hide? Because as it turns out, Russian territory, what is it now? Before, it used to be protection. There was always some kind of invasion, or people fled to the west, or escaped from the Germans to the east. That's it. Or on the one hand, beyond the Urals, or to the other side of the Ural. But now it's a big problem. Now it turns out that wherever you are, a Ukrainian drone can reach you. And across the entire territory of the Russian Federation, you won't have enough anti-missile or air defense systems. So what are you going to do about it? Where are you going to hide? Stay in Gelendzhik all the time? Hide in bunkers and slowly die there? Or will you just sit somewhere trembling in the bathroom as he puts it? In Moscow, somewhere in the Kremlin, in that little apartment he rented for Pasha Zarubin and now pretends is his own? Well, that's just nonsense, Dasha. You see, obviously the situation is difficult right now. We are already being told that Putin, with the help of North Korean manpower, North Korean dogs, will try to destroy Ukraine, that he will intensify offensive actions as early as August with the help of the DPRK. He is already receiving considerable assistance from North Korea, from China, and from Iran as well. And of course, he is accelerating events because he has a very big problem, a huge mess in the economy. I've said this many times already. And he doesn't have the resources to continue this war at the same pace and on the same scale. That's why he's trying to speed things up, yes, to finish faster, but on his own terms. It's not working out on his terms. It's not working out on his terms. So he has to look for something else. Something else means attacking NATO countries. In short, he's stuck, he's bogged down in this swamp, and he doesn't have a single good option to solve the problem. The only option he sees now is to hide and procrastinate, but that won't help either. Sooner or later, he will have to make extraordinary, difficult, extremely difficult, even truly tragic decisions for Russia. And I think he will make these decisions one after another. If you like, we can discuss these decisions one by one.
We definitely will, friends. Our tandem works several times a week on my YouTube channel, Dasha Shaslivaya, and on Dmitry Gordon's YouTube channel. So please write a few kind words of support. This is Sasha plus Dasha, Dasha plus Sasha. I read all the comments and leave hearts, so I would really appreciate it. In the comments, write a few warm words in support of the armed forces of Ukraine and let us know where you're watching from. Sasha, before we discuss these topics, I've also prepared something for you. So what are we doing? For the past, 20 days, we've been constantly hitting railway junctions, blowing up military trains. Just now, we struck again a substation that powered the railway was blown up and the trains have stopped. In Volgograd, we attacked a railway junction. A huge explosion. We blew up an oil depot there. Right now, we attack military airfields, both strategic and tactical nuclear aviation. Now we're targeting the railways. What's happening? This is very important.
It's a preemptive disruption of Russia's offensive actions. In other words, Ukraine is striking at the rear. Ukraine is hitting oil refineries, meaning fuel supply lines. Ukraine is striking directly at the railway. This means the delivery of equipment, delivery, repair of trains, direct delivery of shells, delivery of some manpower, delivery of blood supplies, right? Delivery, including food supplies, and the delivery of individual fuel components as well. In short, we are targeting logistics. We are striking so that the Russian Federation cannot continue to advance to carry out its offensive operations. We have already disrupted the first phase of the offensive. Do you remember how they promised to encircle Sumy, encircle Kharkiv, take Kherson, take Zaporizhia, reach Odessa and occupy Odessa? So what happened? Now that bastard is firing at Privoz, at the Odessa market, out of desperation, out of helplessness. It's all right. Odessa and Privoz will endure. Unfortunately, yes, of course, it's a tragedy. And he is trying to destroy that very Odessa spirit, but he will never destroy it, just like he won't destroy the spirit of Kharkiv or Dnipropetrovsk or Dnipro and so on. But Dasha, we understand perfectly well that he's lashing out of helplessness, out of spite, out of terrible anger, because he can't do anything, because taking Kyiv in 3 days didn't work out. And Odessa, after who knows how many, after 1,000 days, even more, didn't work out either. That's an obvious fact. Another obvious fact is that Ukraine is not just disrupting Russia's offensive actions, but is also trying to destroy Russia's offensive capabilities in the process. These drone strikes on key Russian factories, which produce both electronic warfare stations and separate drone systems, as well as warehouses and arsenals with weapons. All of this shows that Ukraine is trying to destroy Russia's offensive potential. That's why in the coming months, as I told you, the hottest period is beginning, right? The climax, well, here you go. The climax has begun. The hottest period has started. It will progress gradually, step by step, and we will move toward the climax, which will happen at the beginning of September. With Trump or without Trump, it doesn't matter. There will be a major climax, a big climax. I'm sure that Ukraine is preparing not just to disrupt the offensive actions of the Russian Federation, but is getting ready for its own offensive operations. It's not for nothing that Alexander Syrsky, the commander-in-chief of the armed forces of Ukraine, stated in the Washington Post that if Ukraine is given weapons, you will see a large-scale offensive. That's why I interpret this as Ukraine preparing a massive counterstrike against Russia on all fronts. Everything will be absolutely smoking, hissing, and boiling over. On the territory of Moscow, on the territory of St. Petersburg, on the border regions, I don't know how many more vice governors Putin and his inner circle will hang, imprison, or dismember. How many more ministers he'll throw out of windows or have committed suicide. But it's obvious that he will take it out on his own elite. And in time, the elite will turn on Vladimir Putin. He's lost his grip, you see, and soon his elite will lose theirs too. And we've discussed this issue many times already, Dasha. But, it's also important to note the following. It seems to me that right now we're going to see very intensified attacks from Ukraine. That's one. And secondly, there will be an incredible amount of preparation for something very large scale against Russia. And Putin understands this perfectly well. That's why he's escaping to Beijing at the beginning of September. That's why he's building himself a mega bunker somewhere in the cliffs near Gelendzhik. That's why he leveled the Sochi residence to the ground. That's why he canceled the parade. That's why he hasn't been staying in Moscow for a long time, or at least tries not to stay in Moscow. And moreover, Dasha, I just can't shake this intuitive feeling that Putin is preparing to change the government. He probably wants to remove Mishustin. And I wouldn't be surprised if either Ekaterina Tikhonova, his daughter, or someone directly connected to her soon takes the post of Prime Minister of Russia. And as for the State Duma, I won't even mention it because there simply won't be a State Duma. It doesn't need elections at all. He'll just put occupiers in there, a third, a quarter, maybe even half of those occupiers will be sitting there, those thugs whose brains are about as big as a matchbox. So, listen, it seems to me that we're about to see a major reshuffle, a big replacement of everything and everyone in the Russian Federation.
You mentioned a very important point that Syrsky really did say, give us long-range weapons, American and German missiles, and we will, and the war should move on to Russian territory. This is indeed a very important statement. Railways are being sabotaged. Just now, an Su-27 fighter jet was blown up in Armavir. We are attacking military airfields, both tactical and strategic nuclear aviation. This is only the beginning. So Sirski was talking about something bigger. So not just these pinpoint operations by the SBU, the armed forces, and the GUR on Russian territory.
I think it's something bigger. I don't think this is just the beginning. Why? Because it's necessary not only to destroy the current offensive capabilities, or rather the capabilities for the current offensive, but also in general, the strategic and tactical capabilities of the Russian Federation. I think Sirski was talking specifically about this, that a huge part of military facilities, logistics chain objects, and communications should be destroyed in order to essentially disarm Putin, to create every possible condition so that Putin would not have the capability to wage a war of such intensity for a prolonged period. Because his goal is still to wear Ukraine down through attrition. And we need to make sure that he doesn't have the opportunity to wear Ukraine down through attrition. You understand? You've mentioned a few points. I'd like to break them down, so to speak. First, if we're talking specifically about railways and airports, it just so happens in Russia, well, that's the kind of idiots they have there, that everything is focused on Moscow. All the railways, you see, all the railroads, one way or another, lead back to Moscow. All routes go through Moscow. The same goes for civil aviation. Everything flies through Moscow. Everything is transported through Moscow. So what we're saying is that as soon as you cut off certain lines of communication, Moscow starts to suffer. Moscow starts to suffer. And without Moscow, basically, you can't do anything. That's why, essentially, we're striking very, very precisely at the main center, at the decision-making centers, as strange as that may sound right now. Second, the crash near Tinda of the An-24, which is 50 years old. It's a very vivid symbol that indeed Russia is about to experience a wave of plane crashes. Everything will happen, everything will be smoking, there will be nothing but tragedies, nothing but disasters. This is far from the first case. I don't know if Vladimir Putin's plane will crash. After all, he flies on more or less decent equipment, obviously with Western components, at least for now, with Western non-repairable, yes, but still Western components. But the fact that regional aviation is finished, that's a fact. The fact that Russia's economy is in big trouble, that's a fact. And I think that in the near future, we will see Putin impose martial law in Russia, maybe in Moscow, maybe in St. Petersburg. The war will come to Moscow, the war will move to St. Petersburg. And I am more than sure, Dasha, that he will use Moscow's cannon fodder against Ukraine because he has no other option. You have probably heard Valery Zaluzhny's statement, which said that Russia has reached its human resource peak and it has no more capacity and the losses are too great. The price Vladimir Putin is paying is too high and he does not want to carry out mobilization. Now, there's this story that the draft for compulsory military service will take place throughout the entire year. Yes, twice a year they will gather conscripts at the draft offices in the spring and autumn. But nevertheless, the draft itself, yes, all these medical examinations, all the paperwork collection will be happening throughout the year. So he's already looking for opportunities. He is looking for cannon fodder. The fact that they are now actively deploying tanks and electronic warfare equipment near the Estonian border and on the territory of Belarus. The fact that they are now preparing and arming Kaliningrad and arming the Leningrad region to the teeth shows that they are indeed potentially preparing for an attack on the Baltics, on the Baltic countries, on Latvia, Lithuania, and especially on Estonia. The fact that they are preparing to advance along the land corridor, the Suwalki corridor from Belarus to Kaliningrad, and that they are ready for direct war with NATO forces, as well as the statement by NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, and the warning from the Polish authorities that Putin is indeed ready and will make his move in 2027. This is not just talk, these are not scare tactics, they are preparing. Listen, they warned all of us that there would be a war. The Americans warned other countries. They even told Israel about it, yes, that something was going to happen. So, as I'm saying, they know something. They know something. They understand perfectly well that Putin will use Belarus as a staging ground, that he will likely attack, and that this is an inevitable fact. I think that Putin will also try to remove Lukashenko because Lukashenko doesn't want to get involved in this. He doesn't want to lose power. And the only way for Lukashenko, rather, not Lukashenko, but for Belarus to get involved in the war, either against Ukraine or against NATO countries, is to remove Lukashenko. And Putin will follow this scenario. I don't know if he'll succeed. I think he won't. He'll fail there as well. But he really wants to show Russians that he has managed to achieve something in Ukraine. He got Belarus, and at the same time started a war with NATO in order to preserve this potential, this resource of this Russian patriotism in the Russian Federation, to fool people once again and send even more cannon fodder, now even against NATO member countries. We'll see what happens next. But it seems to me that this autumn will be very intense. We will reach a climax. And if Vladimir Putin is stopped both inside Russia and outside of it, primarily, I mean, by American, of course, we will avoid the most catastrophic scenarios, not just for Ukraine, but for the entire West.
Dash, this is a very important point. When we talked about the fact that a command post in Sochi was attacked just a few kilometers from the residence where Putin was speaking with Trump, does this mean that there was a demonstrative helplessness of the air defense even in southern Russia? In essence, they showed the city and delivered a psychological blow personally to Putin. And even the fact that the Navy parade was cancelled is also a powerful blow to Putin, demonstrating his weakness. And the failure of the air defense in the area of Putin's personal security, his residence, his command post, for example, in that same Sochi.
They even demolished the residence. There's nothing there, just a foundation.
I'm referring to the command post, not the residence where Putin stayed when he spoke with Trump on the phone, if you remember. It's not that one, the residence that was burned down. He has a huge number of places there where he can stay. So everyone wrote that in Sochi, a strike was carried out on that residence, on that command post from which Putin held a press conference when he first publicly spoke on the phone with Trump, and everyone was discussing it. That all happened there.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
So they simply showed him that he can be reached anywhere. In other words, the Americans showed him, just as they did to the Iranian authorities, that they can pierce any bunker, any command center, any Gelendzhik, any residence, any of his palaces, any of his portable toilets, wherever he may be, in any of his apartments. This was demonstrated to him. It's a signal. Listen, Vladimir Putin is very afraid. He doesn't fly anywhere. I think he'll be wary even about flying to China. Is he afraid to be in China? He will be afraid to be there. In general, he tries not to leave certain specific places. And listen, I have nothing to add except that most likely they simply showed him that they can easily take him out if they want. The Americans definitely have all the logistics of his movements. All his security has been bought. You know that Putin took all communications away from the FSB and handed them over to his security, the FSO. Previously, the FSB at Lubyanka controlled all communication points, meaning wherever he arrived, like the Kremlin, for example, or his residence or his palatial communications were under the FSB. That is ensuring contacts with other people, providing for direct, basically any entries and exits, telephone communication, checking for bugs, worms, and everything else. Now, all of this has completely shifted Putin's movements. All of it has now been handed over to the security service and directly to the head of security, to his personal bodyguard. So what we're saying is that Putin is very much afraid of the Lubyanka. He's very much afraid of his own general. He understands that it is precisely the Lubyanka historically. That's always been the case. If anyone, only the Lubyanka can remove Putin, or at least the head of the Russian Federation, anyone. This has happened many times over the past decades, even centuries in Russian history. So now should be no exception. And Putin understands this perfectly well. That's why he keeps shuffling the deck among his security detail. That's also why, in principle, he takes direct control of communications away from the FSB and gives it to the FSO, his own security service. This is important. The fact that he's afraid, well, listen, no one is surprised by that anymore. Maybe that's why he doesn't meet with Zelensky and keeps stalling this process all the time. Maybe he's scared. Maybe he's afraid that they'll get rid of him even before the meeting. I don't know. But in any case, it's a very telling moment, right? That wherever Putin has spoken, that place is no longer there. That means they know where he spoke, with whom he spoke, and how he spoke. And his entire security detail, most of the guards, they're traitors who have already been bought off, defectors who are ready to take him out.
Sasha, when we discussed the military parade on May 9th, we knew that she was the guarantor of security, right? And essentially, it was very important that she came, and that's why the parade wasn't blown up. But the fact that the Kremlin was afraid of strikes by the Ukrainian armed forces on Navy data that indicate a lack of control over the airspace, because it's an unprecedented event that Putin, the aggressor, who wants to show his strength to the whole world, canceled the parade in St. Petersburg. In other words, the Kremlin is absolutely acknowledging the threat. And on that same day, air defense attacks in Petersburg and the Leningrad region, more precisely, drones attacks in Petersburg and the Leningrad region, and the air defense hits residential buildings. Sasha, this is a very important signal. I mean, Putin was supposed to show the world, look, here's my navy, here's my parade in St. Petersburg, here I am, I'm so cool. Trump, take a look. But he's not doing that. He got scared.
Dasha, you see, why would he need air defense there? He needs air defense wherever he is. And he's not in St. Petersburg. He didn't go to St. Petersburg. So once again, if he didn't go to St. Petersburg, then let them bomb it. Listen, it's clear that he has a sentimental attachment to St. Petersburg, and it's his capital, it's his hometown. He was born there, yes, it's his birthplace. But he doesn't give a damn about the people of St. Petersburg. He doesn't give a damn about the residents of the Leningrad region. What matters to him is his own life, the lives of those around him, his children, his family, the money, the financial flows they're redistributing right now. That's what matters to him. What's important to him is holding on to power. As for what happens to St. Petersburg or what happens to Moscow or what happens to Rostov or the Belgorod region, he couldn't care less. Air defense only works where Putin is sitting. Where Putin isn't, there's no air defense. He has no intention of ensuring the safety of the Leningrad region or St. Petersburg. He's not planning to protect the Hermitage or anything like that. He's not going to defend Palace Square. He's not going to defend Vasilievsky Island or Peterhof. He doesn't care about any of that. He's never been there and never will be. He doesn't go there and he doesn't plan to. Maybe he'll wander around, but not for any real reason. Not for any kind of intellectual, growth. For intellectual growth, you need to nurture a person. And apparently there was nothing to nurture him with. That's why he never grew. But the point is, you see, Dasha, here's the thing. The point is that after all, the fact that he cancels the parade and that Ukrainian drones are getting through and shutting down Pulkovo airport, the Russian authorities, the regional authorities, it all only shows that Vladimir Putin doesn't have enough resources and forces to protect all of Russia and its key centers. That's the first thing. Second, his potential is already depleted. He still has enough to attack, but not to defend. Third, this means that Putin basically doesn't care at all about anyone or anything. And fourth, there won't be any more parades. There won't be anything. Maybe there will never be another May 9th parade again. I said last time that this was probably the last parade.
Yes, you did say that.
Yes. You see, there won't be any more parades. Why have parades if now there will just be a bloodbath that Putin will unleash? He'll turn Russia, Moscow, and St. Petersburg into a slaughterhouse. Why does he need parades? It's going to be a bloodbath.
Sasha, you've brought up a very important topic, the position of Trump. Witkoff has shown up again stung, so to speak, like a swan. And he appeared...
As a goose?
Yes, as a goose, a swan, whatever he is, I would have stung him with everything possible and everywhere I could. So Marco Rubio, Witkoff, and Trump have all made statements. As usual, Witkoff is sticking to his usual conciliatory line. We'll end the war, there will be peace talks, and so on. But Marco Rubio, the US Secretary of State, spoke much more harshly. He said that Trump is tired of Putin. He considers the negotiations to be a manipulation. An ultimatum, 50 days for peace, or else there will be consequences. It will be cut short. And the US will respond to Putin and will not allow themselves to be deceived. This is the first time I've heard something like this from US Secretary of State Marco Rubio. He wanted a hint that most likely sanctions will be imposed much sooner. Moreover, Trump, responding to a question from journalists, also said, most likely we will be forced to impose sanctions much sooner. Sasha, how do you really assess Trump's attitude toward this situation?
I see it differently, Dasha. I see that Marco Rubio has probably become the most important person in Trump's administration. He started out aiming for the position of Secretary of State, but basically the competition there was too intense. Many are already gone. Trump has removed them. Vance, for example, isn't really making any statements anymore. Although today Marco Rubio said that Vance would be an excellent candidate for the presidency of the Republican Party, nevertheless, he did not rule out his own participation either. But he's gently surrounding Trump with his own aura. He approaches Trump directly, and I understand that he has a very strong influence on Trump's position. Look, Witkoff makes statements, but Witkoff no longer travels anywhere or flies anywhere. Right now, all diplomatic relations are directly in Rubio's hands, and everything depends on him. And matters of national security as well, since he's the secretary responsible for these issues. And also directly the entire diplomatic agenda, since he is the US Secretary of State, the head of America's diplomatic service. That's why, for me, this is an important signal. It means that if not the most important, then one of the most important people in Washington, now in the White House near the Oval Office, is making such statements. In other words, they are considering the possibility of A, delivering a sanctions blow to Putin before September. 2, they are preparing not just to help Ukraine defend itself, but to actually protect Ukrainian airspace. You know that Germany has already delivered 3 air defense systems, that Zelensky is counting on 10 and Trump is counting on 17. They are planning to protect Ukrainian airspace from missile strikes, from missiles. This is extremely important right now because they've really lost it. They've gone crazy. They're already striking tuberculosis clinics, children's facilities, hospitals, kindergartens, supply depots, markets, and so on. That's why there will be air defense, there will be missiles, and as we understand it, a joint drone initiative, joint drone enterprises. The Americans will supply us with drones. Ukraine will provide America with its best developments and technologies. America will share as well. So this will be full-scale protection. You see, this is such an important signal in short. America has gradually turned 180 degrees and decided to enter the war against Putin. That pause that happened, listen, essentially Biden has decided to stop Putin in Ukraine, and Trump most likely has decided to kick Putin out of Ukraine. These are two very different things. And it seems to me that the current bet is precisely on kicking Putin out of Ukraine and doing everything possible to make sure Putin loses. Moreover, not just to lose in and to Ukraine, but also to lose on his own territory. To make it impossible for Putin to carry out further offensive actions, because in America, they suddenly realized that China would try to use Russia in the event of an attack on Taiwan. And America doesn't want that. America needs European forces to be fully focused together with the US in the Pacific when the time comes, when that critical moment, the so-called Hour X, arrives. And the Hour X will inevitably come. I think it will be either at the end of next year or at the beginning of 2027.
Sasha, so does this mean we can expect a change in the US strategy on Ukraine? And will we get Tomahawks and JASSMs from the United States of America?
I don't know. It seems to me that, listen, you see, this war has shown that it's not necessary to have some specific technology. What matters is having a sufficient quantity of everything that's needed. If Ukraine receives the necessary amount of ballistic missiles surface-to-surface, air-to-air, and full protection of Ukrainian airspace, if it gets modern shells, modern missiles, then what difference does it make which missiles they are? Of course, from a symbolic point of view, right? When Ukraine gets 100 or 1,000 Tomahawks, Putin will lose it. But Tomahawks require the necessary systems, launch systems, and so on. So it's the same story as with the Patriots. It's a very expensive toy. And Ukraine needs to get as many weapons as possible, effective weapons, precision weapons, mass-produced weapons, and so on. I think Ukraine will get all of that. If Trump gets completely mad at Putin, Ukraine will get everything, ATACMs, Tomahawks, F-16S, even F-35S if needed, and so on. Putin is simply pushing Trump toward very harmful decisions for Russia. Right now, they're all laughing about how Trump supposedly won't do anything. Skabiva goes live every single day. I keep track and says Trump's ultimatum, 43 days left, 42 days left, 41 days left. When it hits zero, I think Skabiva will blow up just like those Iranian propagandists on the state television company who on the last day were broadcasting that they weren't afraid of Israel or America, and then they got hit. I think that if Skabiva blows up right in the office and it's from Rajer, brains will explode from anger. It would make for a very vivid picture. And Dobrodiv, to be honest, would probably even be pleased deep down the head of all Russian propaganda, because I think even the Russian propagandists themselves are tired of Skabiva and her madness. But Dash, listen, Ukraine will get everything. Russia will force events. Putin will restart his government. His daughter will still receive certain frozen power. She's already doing this. And it seems inevitable to me that they will not just hit military targets, but that they will hit directly those targets where Vladimir Putin is located. So if you are right, and there was a strike on the command center from where Putin was broadcasting and his talks with Trump, this means that things are taking a very serious turn for him. And the countdown has begun, not for Trump, not for Trump's ultimatum, but directly for Vladimir Putin and for his regime.
Sasha, to sum up, is it possible that the West might strike Russian infrastructure? For example, NATO recently held staff exercises on capturing Kaliningrad. Can we expect something very risky from NATO and the West?
Well, first of all, I've long said that the blockade of Kaliningrad is inevitable. You can back me up on that.
Yes.
Second, as soon as Vladimir Putin tries to rattle his sabers either near the borders with the Baltic states and Poland, or directly stages some provocations, sabotage, sends in little green men, mercenaries, or even goes all out with or without Lukashenko, it doesn't matter. Everything going on with them right now is just strange. Kadyrov almost drowned, Shoigu has disappeared. Podnosova, the head of the Supreme Court, right after an argument with Chemezov, suddenly died, even though she had cancer. Strange things are happening. If Lukashenko has a stroke or some kind of heart attack, I won't be surprised either. There's some kind of strange plague starting over there, in quotes. Yeah. But if he tries to use Belarus as well, pushes into the Baltic countries, a blockade of Kaliningrad, the closure of the Danish Strait Chart Times for St. Petersburg are simply guaranteed. That's inevitable because the Europeans clearly understand exactly where to strike right away to really hurt Putin. As long as Vladimir Putin is advancing somewhere or trying to advance, any blockade of Kaliningrad or even the capture of Kaliningrad would be a terrible blow for Putin because it's a huge Russian territory and the Russians would howl. And no amount of Russian patriotism will help. And then a very big question will arise, what to do next. I'll say it again, the Cuban crisis, no, not the Cuban crisis, excuse me, but the crisis of 62, this attempt at nuclear escalation, this time on Putin's part, is a mistake. The Cuban Missile Crisis, it's a mistake. It's a mistake because Putin doesn't have the strength or the means. That's one. And second, any significant escalation of the ongoing war, any aggressive attempt to bring the conflict onto broader European territory as well, simply and unequivocally equals a definitive defeat for Russia. This is not the Soviet Union. Russia is much smaller, much weaker, much poorer, and there are far fewer professionals, including among the security forces, who are even capable in principle of making reasonable decisions. Therefore, Dasha, it seems to me that Putin is facing a major failure in the near future. It's inevitable. And we will be watching this failure. We will be watching it closely.
Sasha, to sum up, do you think that Donald Trump will fly to China on the 3rd of September for the parade in Beijing and meet there with Putin and Xi? What do you think?
Well, my logic tells me no. But I think within the bounds of logic, Trump is illogical, although he does have a certain logic of his own. But he acts like a businessman who tries to make deals, not like a politician. And look, Dasha, if he comes, it will be the biggest blow to America in decades, maybe in 50 years, maybe in 80 years. Why? Because then he'll simply show that China is in charge, that Putin is right. He will essentially hand over Taiwan to China and give the green light to strike Taiwan, destroy Taiwan, seize Taiwan. Because then he'll show that, in principle, he can calmly withdraw from Europe, leave the Europeans to fend for themselves, and give Putin the green light, even if that green light doesn't actually exist. He will create quite a few problems that, in principle, he won't be able to resolve. If he doesn't understand this, I'm sure that people like Rubio and even his wife, Melania Trump, do understand it. That's why Trump will most likely be stopped. Will they remove him from office, the new one? I don't know. And whether they let him barricade himself in the Oval Office, I don't know. But for some reason, I have a feeling that, he won't go anywhere, at least not to China in these coming days. But if he does go and there's a three-way meeting there, it will just be a terrible situation that, you see what I mean? Back when all those events happened, Tehran, Yalta, Potsdam, those were meetings where the end of the war was being decided. Yes, the redistribution of the world, but still it was about ending and winning over the enemy and finishing World War II. If now there's a meeting in Beijing, it will be a meeting that will signify the beginning of World War I, too. And that's very bad. I hope that the American president won't go through with this and that the people in his inner circle will stop him if he decides to.
As always, excellent analysis from top analyst Alexander Demchenko. Friends, our tandem works several times a week on my YouTube channel. Take care. Give this video a like. Write a few kind words in the comments to support Ukraine and our tandem. Dasha plus Sasha, Sasha plus Dasha. Sasha, thank you so much and see you this Tuesday.
See you next time. Bye.